The dry city, the city of Var'kal, baked under the heat of 2 suns. The air shimmered above the rooftops, and the streets smelled of dust and stone. Every shadow was short. Every breath felt heavy. And every drop of water was worth more than gold. Water in Var'kal was not free. It was controlled by the Council of Purity, a group of old, powerful leaders who decided who was worthy of drinking it. If the council declared you pure, you could drink from the public fountains. If they declared you impure, you were left to dry. On this day, the line at the central fountain stretched across the square. Tall metal pipes hissed and steamed, sending a cool mist into the air. The smell of fresh water made people's mouths ache with thirst. Lira stood in that line, her small hands clutched together, her lips cracked and bleeding. She was young, maybe 16 years by human years, with pale lavender skin and faint, silver freckles that caught the sunlight. Her dark hair stuck to her face, wet with sweat. She had been standing there for hours when her turn finally came. She stepped forward quickly, her eyes fixed on the stream of water pouring from the fountain spout. A guard stepped in front of her. His armor was dull bronze, his helmet shaped like the head of a desert hawk. He held a black scanning device in his clawed hand. Without a word, he pressed the device to her arm. It beeped. A red light flashed. The screen showed one word in large letters, Impure. The guard's expression did not change. "Step aside," he said, his voice flat. "But I have been waiting," Lira said, her voice weak. "Please, no water for the impure," the guard interrupted. He pushed her back with one hand. Murmurs spread through the line. Some people turned their heads away. Others whispered to each other. A few smirked, enjoying the humiliation. Lira's throat burned. She tried to speak again, but her tongue felt thick. Her knees trembled. The heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She could see the water sparkling in the sunlight, so close. The ground tilted under her feet. She stumbled, fell to her knees. Dust rose around her, sticking to her sweaty skin. The noise of the fountain faded into a dull hum. In her ears, the guard had already turned to the next person in line. No one came to help. Her vision blurred. Shapes moved like shadows. She felt the sharp bite of the sun on her back. Her body begged for water. And then the sunlight dimmed. A shadow fell across her. A tall figure knelt beside her. His voice was deep, warm, and strangely calm. "Easy now," he said. Lira blinked, trying to see his face. He wasn't from Var'kal. His skin was light brown, his hair dark and short. He wore no helmet, no council mark. His clothes were strange, fabric instead of armor, dusty from travel. And in his hand was a silver flask. He unscrewed the cap and held it out to her. "Drink." She stared at it. Her mind screamed yes, but her fear whispered no. Everyone in Var'kal knew the rule: never touch a human's belongings. The council said it was dangerous, forbidden. The crowd had noticed. Now, whispers grew louder. She's going to take it. Impure and now touching human things? She's finished. Someone call the guards. The guard from before turned, his eyes narrowing. "Put that away, human. You break our law." The man didn't move. "She's dying," he said simply. "It's her fate," the guard replied. "Step back." The human's eyes locked on the guards. No. The air felt heavier, like the heat had paused to listen. Lira's heart pounded in her ears. The human brought the flask closer to her lips. She could smell the water, clean, fresh, nothing like the metallic taste of the fountain. Her dry throat ached painfully. Her hands shook as she reached for it. For one moment, she hesitated, looking at the people watching, at the guard's hard face, at the law she was about to break, Then she drank. The water was cold. It slid down her throat like life itself. Her head cleared, her vision sharpened. She gasped for air between gulps, but she could not stop. The crowd gasped too, but for another reason. They had just seen a human defy the council in public. The guard's voice rose like thunder. "You will pay for this." The human capped the flask and slipped it into his bag. "Then punish me," he said calmly. Without another word, he lifted Lira to her feet, one arm steadying her as if she weighed nothing. He turned away from the fountain, from the guards, from the square full of staring eyes. Where are you taking me?" she whispered, still dizzy. "Somewhere they can't decide who lives and dies," he said. Behind them, boots pounded against the stone. Shouts filled the air. The human's grip tightened, but his stride stayed calm and certain. Lira looked back once, seeing the fountain fade into the dust. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he had helped her, but she knew one thing. The moment she touched that flask, her life had changed forever. The flask. The market streets twisted like a maze. Stalls of dried fruit and cracked pottery leaned into the narrow alleys, their colors bleached by the sun. The smell of hot dust mixed with the sour scent of rotting dates. Captain Elias Ward kept moving, the silver flask hidden inside his coat. Lira stumbled beside him, every few steps glancing over her shoulder. "They're following," she whispered. "I know," Elias said, his voice steady. The shouts behind them were closer now. Guards in bronze armor pushed through the crowd, their weapons clanging against their chests. Elias turned sharply into a shadowed alley, pulling Lira behind a stack of broken crates. His eyes swept the street. 2 drones floated overhead, scanning faces with red beams. "They will see us," she said. "Not if we move smart," he replied. His tone wasn't comforting. It was simply certain, as if fact and fate were the same to him. From his pocket, Elias pulled a small black disc and pressed a button. A pulse of blue light rippled out, and the drones above them sparked, their lights dying. They dropped to the street like stones. Lira's eyes widened. "That is Forbidden's tech." Elias gave a small shrug. "So is giving water to the Impure. Guess I'm already guilty." Before she could answer, the sound of boots on stone echoed in the alley. A guard's shadow stretched across the wall. Elias moved fast, taking her hand. "This way." They ducked into a side passage so narrow the walls scraped their shoulders. It opened into an abandoned courtyard, half buried in sand. Lira pulled, free from his grip, breathing hard. "Why?" Elias looked at her. "Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. You risk death for a stranger." He took the flask from his coat, turning it in his hands. The sunlight caught the metal, making it shine like a blade. "Because I've seen your law before," he said quietly. "Different world, same cruelty." She frowned. "You speak as if you hate this place." "I don't hate this place," Elias said, his eyes narrowing. "I hate the people who think they can decide who's worth saving." A faint hum cut through the air, more drones heading their way. Elias's head snapped up. Time to move. They left the courtyard and slipped into another alley, but the heat pressed down harder now. The streets grew emptier. Lira could feel the city tightening around them, every turn leading closer to the guards. When they reached a stone archway at the edge of the market, Elias stopped. "Beyond here, the patrols are thicker. We need to vanish." "Vanish?" Lira asked. Elias crouched and pressed his hand against the stone floor. A panel shifted with a soft grind, revealing a hole in the ground, a tunnel entrance. Cool, stale air rose from the darkness below. "This will take us under the city," Elias said. "But once we go down, there's no turning back." Lira looked into the tunnel's mouth. It was black as night, and the smell of old dust made her nose sting. "What's down there?" Elias's lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "Things the council doesn't want anyone to find." Voices shouted from the street behind them. Armor clanged. Elias stepped into the dark without hesitation. "Come on," he called softly. Lira hesitated for just a heartbeat, then followed. The panels slid shut above their heads, swallowing the sunlight. The tunnel walls were close, the air heavy. The only sound was their footsteps and the faint slosh of water inside the flask. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. Elias's voice floated back to her through the dark. "To the truth." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the underground air. She didn't know what truth he meant, but she could feel it. Something waited ahead in the darkness, and it would change everything. Asterisk, the mark of impurity, the tunnel, stretched on like the inside of a sleeping beast, narrow, ribbed with stone, and smelling of damp girth. Lira followed close behind Elias, her bare feet brushing the grit on the ground. The silver flask bumped lightly against his hip with each step, and the sound was maddening. She was thirsty again already, but thirst wasn't the only thing crawling in her chest. It was fear. Fear of the council's punishment. Fear of where this human was taking her. After what felt like hours, they stopped in a small chamber lit by faint blue crystals in the walls. The light painted their faces in ghostly color. Elias turned to her. "Let me see it," he said. "See what?" "The mark on your arm." Her pulse jumped. She pulled her sleeve down instinctively. "Why?" "Because I've seen that glow before. And it's not what they tell you it is." For a moment she stood still, debating. Then slowly she rolled her sleeve back. The faint glowing mark shimmered under the crystal light, a circle of silver lines like a broken ring, etched into her skin since birth. The council called it the seal of impurity. They said it meant her blood was tainted with outsider genes. Her permanent shame. Elias studied it, his eyes sharp. "This isn't impurity," he said quietly. "It's a code." "Ah, code?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device no bigger than his palm. It had a thin lens at the front. When he held it over her arm, the mark flared brighter, then projected faint holographic lines into the air. Lira gasped. "Floating." Above her skin was a star map. "This is," she began. "Coordinates," Elias finished. "Hidden in plain sight. Whoever gave you this mark wanted you to find something." Her throat tightened. "But why would the council? They don't want anyone finding it?" Elias cut in. His tone was iron now. "Whatever's at those coordinates, it's big enough that they'd rather let you die of thirst than risk you discovering it." A sharp whine echoed down the tunnel. Lyra's heart skipped. "Drones," she whispered. Elias's eyes narrowed. "They're tracking the mark." "Of course." He grabbed her hand. "We have to move. Now." They ran deeper into the tunnels, their shadows leaping across the walls in the crystal light. Drone whine grew louder, metal claws scraping stone. Up ahead, the tunnel split in two. Elias didn't hesitate. He took the left path, leading to a rusted metal door. He slammed his palm against a panel, and the door slid open with a scream of old gears. Beyond it was a cavern, vast and echoing. Pools of still water reflected the blue crystals above. It was beautiful and dangerous. "This is an old maintenance reservoir," Elias said quickly. "They abandoned it when the council moved all water to the upper city." Lira moved toward the nearest pool, but Elias stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "Don't drink it. Not yet." She frowned. "Why?" "Because," he said, scanning the water with his device, "I think I know what the council's been hiding." Before she could ask, the whine of drones burst into the cavern. Red lights swept across the water, locking on them. Elias stepped. Between her and the approaching machines, pulling something from his belt, a small black sphere. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "A bad idea." He tossed it into the water dot. There was a flash, not light, but darkness, like the shadows themselves had exploded outward. The drone lights flickered and died, crashing into the pools. The cavern fell silent again, except for one new sound. From somewhere in the depths, a low, distant hum began to rise. Lira felt the mark on her arm heat up, glowing brighter than ever. Elias looked at her. "Whatever's calling you, we just woke it up." Asterisk the council's decree. The hum the cavern swelled, vibrating in the air like the growl of something huge beneath the stone. It wasn't just sound. Lira could feel it in her bones. Blue ripples spread across the still pools, distorting the reflection of the crystal lights. Somewhere deep in the water, something moved. Elias's gaze darted between the pools and the tunnel they came from. "We can't stay here." But before they could run, a sharp ping came from his wrist device. A red sigil pulsed on the screen. The council's seal. Lira stepped closer. "What is that?" Elias's jaw tightened. "An open decree, city-wide." The device began to read the message aloud in the council's cold metallic voice. "Attention, citizens of Var'kal. The human known as Elias Ward has broken the law of purity. He is guilty of providing water to an impure. Both are to be captured immediately. Use of lethal force is authorized. Water denial is to be carried out at once upon capture." Lira's stomach dropped. The words were not just an order. They were a death sentence. Elias shut the device off. "They've turned the whole city into hunters. Not just guards, everyone." A sound echoed down the tunnels, not the sharp mechanical whine of drones, but the deep, steady rhythm of boots. "Many boots. Military unit," Elias muttered. "They're moving fast." Lira's heart pounded. "We can't outrun the whole city." "No," he agreed, "but we can disappear from it." He led her toward the far end of the cavern, where a narrow walkway clung to the rock wall above the water. The hum from below grew louder as they crossed, the pools glowing faintly now. Halfway across, something in the water brushed against the surface, just enough to make a ripple. Lira froze. "Elias, I see it." A shape glided under the water, massive and slow. For a second, she thought it was just shadow. Then a pale, glassy eye rolled upward, looking right at her. The hum deepened. The mark on her arm burned hot. The creature's head broke the surface, a vast, serpentine thing with skin like whetstone and fins tipped in crystal shards. It stared at her, then at Elias, then slid closer without making a sound. "What is it?" she whispered. Elias's face was unreadable. "Something the council doesn't want anyone to know exists." The boots were closer now, shouts echoing through the tunnels. The soldiers were nearly at the cavern entrance. The creature let out a low, strange sound, not threatening, but almost inviting. The mark on Lyra's arm flared, and without thinking, she stepped toward the edge. Elias caught her wrist. "Careful. I think it's calling me," she said, her voice shaking. The shouts became clearer. The soldiers were here. Dozens of armored figures poured into the cavern, rifles raised, red sight lasers sweeping the rocks. Elias's grip tightened. "We don't have time to figure out what it wants. We either dive now, or we die here." The soldiers fanned out. One of them, the same hawk helmet guard from the fountain, raised his weapon. "End of the line, human." Elias made his choice. He shoved the flask into Lyra's hands and pulled her with him off the ledge. The water swallowed them whole. The hum became a roar. Something vast moved in the dark below, wrapping around them, not crushing, but carrying. Through the rippling light above, Lira saw the soldiers rush to the edge, weapons flashing, and then the cavern ceiling vanished. As the creature dragged them into the black depths. Asterisk, the chase cold swallowed them. Lira couldn't tell which way was up, only that something huge was moving with them, pushing them through the water faster than she thought possible. She clutched the silver flask to her chest, her lungs burning, her ears full of the deep rumble. From the creature. The sound wasn't just in the water, it was inside her head. Lira, her eyes flew open. The voice wasn't Elias's, it wasn't even human. Lira. Follow. Then they broke the surface. They were in another cavern. This. One far older. Its walls were carved with spirals and symbols, some glowing faintly with the same light as her mark. Water dripped from high above, the air heavy and cool. The creature slid back into the deep pool, leaving only ripples behind. Elias coughed, shaking water from his hair. That was new. Lira turned in a slow circle. Where are we? Elias scanned the carvings with his device. His eyebrows drew together. Not on any map I've seen. Which means the council has kept this place hidden for a long, long time. Before she could answer, a faint mechanical whine cut through the air. Distant, but growing. Lira froze. Drones? Elias's jaw tightened. Not just drones, hunters. He switched off his scanner and motioned for her to follow. We move now. If they've got our trail this deep, it means they're using something stronger than standard tracking. They slipped into a narrow side tunnel, their wet clothes leaving dark marks on the stone. The air grew warmer, the ground steeper. Behind them, the hum of machines grew sharper, joined by the faint echoing bark of orders. Lira's pulse spiked. They're close. They're fast, Elias corrected. And they don't care about the rules down here. If they catch us, they won't waste time with trials. The tunnel ahead split in two. Elias glanced at each path for less than a second before choosing the right-hand one. How do you? Lira began. Instinct, he said, cutting her off. The floor here was slick with moss, and the sound of rushing water grew louder. The tunnel widened into a ledge that overlooked an underground river. Elias stopped, scanning the shadows. They'll expect us to follow the river downstream. So we go upstream? He jumped down onto the rocks beside the water, and she followed. The current was strong enough to pull at her feet, and icy enough to make her teeth ache. Every few seconds, Elias glanced back, not at the river, but at her. Keep the flask high. Don't drop it. Not even if. The rest of his sentence was drowned out by a blinding blue flash from the tunnel. They just left. Drones burst through, scanning beams sweeping across the cavern. Elias swore. They've got our heat signatures. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the water. The current dragged them both forward, bouncing them off rocks. The drones followed above the river, their beams slicing the dark. Elias pulled a small cylinder from his belt, bit the cap off, and tossed it into the current behind them. It exploded in a hiss of smoke and sparks, filling the cavern with a choking mist. The drones shrieked in static confusion, their lights flickering. Lira gasped for air as they stumbled onto a slippery bank further upstream. Her legs burned, her chest heaved. Elias didn't slow. We've got maybe a minute before they recalibrate. We need high ground. They scrambled up a narrow stone path cut into the cavern wall. The sounds of the drones were already returning, like angry hornets in the dark. Halfway up, Lira looked back, and her breath caught. Below, through the fading smoke, dozens of soldiers poured in behind the drones. Their armor gleamed in the crystal light, and at the front was the hawk helmet guard. He looked up at her and raised his weapon. The shot hit the stone beside her head, spraying shards into her hair. Elias shoved her forward. Move! The path ended at a jagged opening. Another tunnel, this one pulsing faintly with the same light as her mark. Lira hesitated at the threshold. "Elias, this looks like trouble," he said. "Perfect." They dove inside just as the drones closed in, vanishing into the strange glowing dark. Asterisk. The well of first rain, the tunnel swallowed them whole, its walls alive with veins of pale blue light. The air here was warmer, almost humid, and every breath carried the faint scent of rain, a smell Lira had only read about in old stories. There, footsteps echoed strangely, as if the stone itself was listening. Elias slowed, scanning the walls with his device. "This isn't just rock. These are conduits. Something's been pumping water through here for centuries." Lira ran her fingers along the glowing veins. They pulsed faintly under her touch, and the mark on her arm answered, glowing in rhythm. Elias noticed. "It's linked to you." Before she could reply, the tunnel widened abruptly into a cavern unlike anything she'd seen. The ceiling soared high above, hung with crystalline stalactites dripping slow, perfect drops into a vast, still pool. The water glowed faintly from beneath, casting soft light across the black stone floor. At the center of the pool rose a circular platform, and on it stood an ancient, weathered pillar. Etched into it were the same spiral symbols from the older cavern, but here they burned bright, alive. Lira's breath caught. "What is this place?" Elias's voice was low. "The well of first rain." She stepped toward the edge, the water perfectly still around the platform. "You've heard of it?" "Rumors," Elias said. "A water source from before the council existed. Pure, endless, impossible to control." Lira looked back at him. "If this is real, why hasn't the city used it?" His eyes darkened. "Because if everyone had water, the council wouldn't have power." The weight of that truth settled between them like a stone. Then, a sound. A faint splash. Lira turned sharply. Nothing moved, but the ripples spread across the water toward the platform. Elias drew his weapon. "We're not alone." The glow from the water deepened, and the mark on Lira's arm flared so brightly it hurt. Symbols on the central pillar shifted, twisting into a new pattern, one that looked almost like a map. She took a step forward, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. "Lira." The voice again in her mind. "Drink and remember." Her feet touched the water. It was warmer than she expected, like the heat of skin. Elias moved to stop her, but the ground shook. A deep rumble from somewhere far below. From the shadows beyond the pool. Movement, multiple shapes, gliding just under the surface. Drones? No, too smooth, too fluid. Then they broke the surface. Sleek, eel-like creatures with crystal fins, their eyes glowing with the same light as the water. They circled the platform, but did not come closer, as if waiting for something. Elias kept his weapon raised. "I don't like this." The air shimmered, not from heat, but from some invisible pressure, and a column of light erupted from the pillar, shooting up to the ceiling and beyond, as if piercing the world above. Far away, deep in the tunnels they'd left behind. The faint echo of voices carried, soldiers closing in. Elias's jaw tightened. "If you're going to do something, do it now." Lira looked at the water, at the creatures, at the burning mark on her arm. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Somewhere above, the hawk helmet guard was already giving the order to fire. She stepped into the pool. The water rose around her like it was alive. Asterisk the gift, the water closed over Lira's legs, warm and weightless, like it was welcoming her. The moment her hands touched the surface, the well responded. The glow surged outward, rippling across the pool in waves of light. The eel-like creatures froze in place, their glowing eyes fixed on her. "Lira!" Elias's voice was urgent, but distant, as if the sound had to fight its way through the air. Whatever it's doing, the mark on her arm blazed white-hot, and the voice returned, louder, clearer, child of two worlds. The drought is their chain. Break it. Symbols from the central pillar spiraled upward into the air, forming a ring of light around her. Inside it, she saw images, a flood of visions, a time before the council when the city drank freely from rivers and rain, outsiders and natives living together without the word impure. The day the council sealed the well, cutting off the city's heart, the voice whispered one final command: share it. All of it. Lira plunged her hands into the well. Power surged through her, not pain, but an overwhelming rush of life. Her skin glowed, and the glow raced outward into the water dot above. The cavern shook as the water began to rise, overflowing the pool. Elias grabbed her arm. They're here. Soldiers poured in at the far tunnel, the hawk helmet guard at their front. His voice thundered over the noise. Step away from the well, now. But the water had already reached the edge, spilling into the channels carved into the cavern floor. The glowing streams shot down every tunnel, every crack. Racing back toward the city, the guard fired, but the water surged upward in a curtain, catching the blast and dispersing it into harmless sparks. Around them, the eel creatures swam in tight circles, their fins cutting patterns in the glowing surface. The patterns matched the spirals on the pillar. And then Lira understood. They're keepers, she breathed. Guardians of the well. The hawk helmet guard's tone turned desperate. You don't know what you're unleashing. Lira looked him in the eye. I know exactly what I'm freeing. The light from the water flared, and in the city above, fountains burst to life. In the poorest districts, cracked pipes flowed clean again. In the council's private reservoirs, locks shattered under the surge. Water poured into streets that hadn't seen it in generations. The decree against her was still echoing in the council chamber when the first waves reached their steps. The hawk helmet guard stumbled back, his weapon shaking. The soldiers behind him faltered. Elias stepped forward, lowering his own weapon, but his stance was iron. This is over, he said. The water belongs to everyone now. The well's glow began to fade as the last of its surge spread into the world above. Lira stepped out of the pool, water streaming from her clothes. The mark on her arm now a faint silver scar. Elias handed her the flask. Keep it, just in case they try again. She took it, feeling its weight. Not just metal, but memory. From deep in the well, the guardian creatures slipped back into the shadows, their work done. As soldiers withdrew in silence, their leader, casting one last, unreadable look before vanishing into the tunnels. Lira and Elias stood alone in the cavern. Now what? She asked. Elias smiled faintly. Now, we see what they'll do without their leash. Somewhere far above, in a city that had never known rain, thunder rolled. Asterisk.